Ladies and gentlemen, it has been too long. This is, of course, your favorite Shogun here, Sugi, and today I'm gonna be reviewing one of the anime from this season known as Clevatess. But before we go into my individual review of this anime, let's kind of break down a bit of the premise and what exactly is this anime about. So the premise of Clevatess takes place on this humanoid continent, which is populated by different humanoid races. But on each corner of this continent, there are these four dark beasts, which are basically controlling the north, the south, the east, and west. So basically, each border is controlled by one dark beast, and the humans are obviously in conflict with these beasts, and they're trying to expand, obviously, from this continent to see what is the world beyond these borders, essentially. And they have been, for centuries, basically sending out these heroes to basically slay these dark beasts. And in the beginning episode, 13 heroes have been sent to challenge the dark beast of the southern border, known as Clevatess, where the name comes from. But they are utterly defeated and killed off. And Clevatess kind of gets enraged and decides that, yeah, these humans are kind of a bit of a nuisance, so I'm basically going to be genociding them. And he decides to basically, storm the capital of Hiden and basically turns it into rubble and ashes. And from the rubble, there's this dying civilian who is basically asking Clevatess to save this infant child known as Luna, and says that this child is innocent to the conflict that's basically going on between the dark beasts and the humanoid races. And basically, Clevatess is kind of like amusing this and decides to say yes and take care of the baby, and has this like a moral inquiry about like, are our lives set to stone the day we are born, or do we have actually ability to change our destinies? It's a bit of a philosophical inquiry for Clevatess. And then Clevatess basically decides to resurrect one of these 13 heroes known as Alicia, and this will become like a sort of a zombie servant for Clevatess to basically take care of the baby. And then they decide to adventure into the human world. Clevatess assumes a human form, and he kind of wants to understand about the humans, as he's been living in this mountain in isolation from the humans and for 1,000 years or something like that. So basically, it's kind of like this, wants to understand the human and what is going on, and are they like worthy of living and all that type of stuff. Now, what I like about this show is that it's quite refreshing fantasy show because it's not isekai. A lot of the modern shows that come out are all isekais. Not to say that there's anything wrong with a show being isekai. It's just that a lot of these modern ones are done very poorly, and they don't play into the strengths of the isekai setting. Let's say Harry Potter or Inuyasha does, because the best part about isekai is that there's an interaction between the worlds. It's not just like with these modern ones where the character dies in the real world and then is respawned in another one. So there's no correlation or activity between the two worlds. It's just like sort of a like escapist setting that they're trying to like portray to the modern Japanese audiences who are trapped in school life or work life, which they don't enjoy, and they just kind of want to be reborn or have a different type of life. So it's kind of adhering into the modern societies of Japan instead of like having a very interesting dynamic setting between two different worlds with two different types of views and all that type of stuff, like Harry Potter, like I mentioned. So this is more of a dark fantasy show. It's not as brutal and dark as something like Berserk, but there's a lot of gore in this one as well. People die, and there's also some unconsensual sex maybe happening as well. So there are some kind of touchy things in this show, but it's definitely not as edgy as some of the other dark fantasy shows out there. And I think there's also a lot of like comedic segments in this show, which make it a bit more lighthearted. So it does like a good balance between like being serious and being a bit more joking around, at the same time. So that's something that I kind of like about. There's like a playful nature into this show, especially the dynamic between Alicia and Glenn, which is the Clevatess's name that he basically assumes in the human form. So yes, there's some gore going on and some sexual themes as well. Not too many of them so far. I mean, it's also only a 12-episode season, so I don't know what's in store in the upcoming seasons. And basically, the first season revolves around three primary characters. You have Alicia, who is technically the main character here. Then we have Clem, who is Clevatess. And then we have the third character, which is Nello, who is introduced a bit early on, and she is kind of like this sort of a caretaker of the baby. And technically, the baby is a character, but doesn't really have any lines, so it's kind of like a filler character. As there's no, well, there's a small character development for the baby, but overall, like the baby is a very irrelevant character, as there's no dialogue or really big actions that the baby is taking currently in the story. So in a sense, like the story is explored throughout the resurrected hero, Alicia from her lens, and she's kind of introducing Glenn into the human world, and they're also kind of learning a bit about the magic in the world, which is kind of like a new phenomena, or it's a bit of a mysterious element, which both of them don't seem to be fully understanding what exactly it is and where is it coming from. And this is something that is introduced in the first half of the anime. Is a bit, bit of exploration on what exactly is that all about. Now, Glenn as a character is like something, technically is a protagonist and a main character, but obviously he is playing a role of like a potential anti-hero, like antagonist character, because he does have the idea in his head that, hey, I might wipe out the humans. So he is kind of like a bad guy at the same time. So it's not really, it's kind of like a neutrally evil character, I would argue. So but this character is not really, he is not explaining to Alicia what is beyond the borders. He's not explaining a lot about the nature of the dark ichor, which is basically the essence that makes him able to control Alicia. So there's a lot of lore and the magic and a lot about the beasts that like Len is really hiding from Alicia and from the audience. So that's really good that Alicia exists as a character in the story, because Glenn is really mysterious, shadowy character and doesn't really tell that much about the world and what exactly is going on. Like there's some information tidbits that are dropped out, but very, very loosely and very, very they're not really filled with a lot of nuts of information, so to speak. So they're kind of like vague in their statements. And Glenn is also a bit of like a Gary Stu archetype, very omnipotent in a lot of ways, because the Dark Beasts are immensely powerful, as they have not been able to be killed by the heroes, at least according to the evidence that we have so far in the series. There might have been something about that in the manga, which I have not read. Now, and the problem with the Glenn's character obviously is that you might have sometimes a character that is very omnipotent, let's say Saitama from One Punch Man, and what makes that character very balanced is because not only the show is comedic, so it's not really a problem to have a Garys 2 character if it's done in a comedic way, but also Saitama is not very smart. The problem with Glenn is that he's very powerful. Basically, I'm pretty sure that he cannot be killed by these humans, really. Not in a real sense. And also, he's very intelligent, and he's not like knowing absolutely everything about the magic and everything that goes around in the story and the show, but it's like maybe too clever for his own good, and maybe too, I don't like the, it also reminds me of the main character from Dr. Stone. He's not really struggling at all in this show. He's not going setbacks. He's not fighting against opponents, at least not yet, who are equally strong as him. I mean, at some point, probably in the story, he will be fighting another Dark Beast. So that will be very interesting. So there are a lot of that as Gary's 2 elements into this character, which are very unattractive in my way, because I don't think that's good form of writing. Other people might disagree with that type of sentiment, but that is my position on writing, that is a very, very weak form of a character if there's no character development. And omnipotent characters really hardly go through these types of character development arcs. Now, then there's obviously Alicia, and she goes a bit of a character development because she will reflect about kind of like there's a bit of like one of the themes in the show is obviously like the heroes are not exactly, it's kind of like a bit of a scam because they're failing and maybe they're kind of meant to fail. So she's kind of reflecting about what is meaning to be a hero exactly. So there's a bit of a character development for her. And then we have Neluru, who is a character who is basically the babysitter of the baby, and there's a bit of a character arc for her in the story. And she goes a physical transformation as well, which I don't know why exactly. Maybe for sex appeal or so in the manga books. I don't know, but she was also like a somewhat relevant character, but not very big, and doesn't really do that much in this first season at least. So what I like outright, the story might kind of seem somewhat of a generic fantasy show, but I would argue that there's a decent amount of depth in the world and the general lore and the mysteries you kind of want to learn more about. I want to know what is beyond these borders, what exactly. And there's a lot of mysteries that are kind of info dumped on you on the very last episode. So some things are kind of interesting, about the. Well, I can't. I'm not going to be spoiling about. I'll let you find about those. But there are definitely elements about the mythology of the world which are interesting, and that's kind of like a rare thing with a lot of modern fantasy anime that I've watched. So that's a very pleasant surprise for me that the world is actually interesting. It's not super generic. Yes, it has a lot of like dark beasts and like these humanoid races, which I haven't seen other fantasy shows, but there are also some unique elements here. So the writer kind of knows somewhat what he's doing in here. When it comes to the animation, I think it's capturing a bit of that 90s essence, which I really appreciate. Not to say that the show itself is aesthetically or thematically anything like a 90s anime, like the attires and the clothing. They're not, the author is obviously not reiterating like the 90s classics, is not trying to be a 90s, it's not trying to be Berserk. It has a modern feel to it in certain sense of designs. But it is still like very good with this dark fantasy setting and pairing. The how the anime looks, it has it's not like a texture. It's really hard to sometimes describe these anime styles between each other and the details on them. I just kind of like it. Just like has more like a traditional pen feel into the lines and the outlines of the characters. I just like that. So this is kind of some of the high end movie settings sometimes we see in some anime movies. And I think the animation quality is pretty good. I didn't see any shots that were really bad, or I'm not like super, obviously, my followers know that I'm not super critical about animation in general. To me, that's very like secondary to anything else when it comes to the story and everything else. And in terms of the OST and the music, I have to say I was not a fan of the ending song. The opening song, kind of forgettable, let's be honest about it. And so is the OST. So the OST is something very forgettable. I can't really. I'm trying to think right now. Can I remember any of the music in the show? And I barely can remember a bit of the opening song, and that's it. So musically, I'm not impressed by this one. I'm pretty critical when it comes to the OSTs in general, but. If it had a better OST, I think it could have scored higher and had maybe more interest on the whole show. But I mean, I guess it's not bad either. So there's no annoying tracks, at least there. So overall, I really enjoyed Clevatess, and I would technically say that it is kind of like the top show of the season for me. Not that I have watched that many anime from this season. I'm still kind of processing on watching some of them. Have to finish them. Kind of finish that backlog. But overall, I would say like yeah. I really enjoyed this one, and when I saw the initial trailer, I was kind of like, "Yeah, there's some promise here," and I really fulfilled that promise. So, the world is interesting, but we obviously have to see like when that grand reveal is going to be happening, how I'm going to be reacting to that, and is that grand reveal actually good? It's like, watching One Piece. Like, One Piece is highly regarded show, but it's going to be a very different view on the show from in a hindsight once the reveal is going to be happening. What exactly is the One Piece? So these types of reveals can sometimes be really good and sometimes like really bad. But I really like the anticipation of like learning more about the world here, so I am engaged with it, and that's a very good sign for me. But that's gonna be my take on Clevatess, so definitely recommending it for dark fantasy fans, because there are not really that many shows that are coming out. Ubenblatt was very bit of a flop. A lot of people didn't like it. I mean, I thought it was okay, but maybe something actually I should probably review. But anyhow, thanks for watching. See you soon in the next review when that will be dropping out. Thanks for watching.